You argue that forgiveness is, is a part of our wiring as well. It's a human instinct, a deeply human instinct as well. What's your evidence there?
Yeah, one of the most interesting things for me, and it really was the reason I kind of set out on this book, was to figure out why do we have this endowment but not X-ray vision, And it turns out if you look at the same bodies of research that make revenge seem like the product of natural selection, you find evidence just screaming at you that you can't get humans in the current form without giving them, back as our species was evolving, the capacity to forgive. So, for example, we can talk about animal literature, we can talk about anthropologic literature, cross-cultural research, but we can also talk about, we can go back to cooperation, which I think is, to me, was one of the most interesting eye-openers for me. If we need punishment to make cooperation happen, so we keep those free riders from spoiling the nice things we want to do, we also need the ability to tolerate defection, unwitting mistakes that our cooperation partners are sometimes going to make, right? My interests, as much as I might like you, which I do, our interests would never line up perfectly. I mean, there would always be places where, even if we were trying to get along with each other and cooperate, I might do things you didn't like that might inadvertently harm you. So if you had a mechanism in you that said, I'm going to respond to every time I'm harmed with a counter-harm, then that would also prevent you from ever getting something built that you cared about. That would also prevent you from being able to develop group rearing of children within a living group. I mean, if every time somebody did something that hurt your feelings, you were going to hurt their feelings, you couldn't raise your children together. You couldn't farm a common plot. You couldn't defend a village. You couldn't do cooperative hunting. I mean, all of these kinds of cooperative social processes that humans have specialized in, we could have never gotten started if every grudge had to be sort of turned into revenge.
No, I can see that argument for family,
yeah,
because you care that your genes are protected, so to speak. I can see it for friends or other people that you cooperate with.
Right.
But why on earth is there an instinct to forgive your enemies?
Well, that is the question, and I think if we're going to talk hard truths, I think the instinct is there for relationships that have value. Okay, so value can come from genetic relatedness. My child, my 8-year-old hyperactive child has caused me bodily pain more times than I could possibly count. Inadvertent. I remember the time I was drinking out of a water glass, which he slammed into my teeth, and then he broke my tooth. But these things, kids do these things. Did I take a water glass and slam it into his teeth? Of course you don't do that. But you also wouldn't dignify it with the term forgiveness. That's just you're a parent and you kind of deal with it, and that's that. I didn't tell him I would withhold dental care from him or in the future or anything like that, right? So, but again, you wouldn't dignify it with the term forgiveness, but that's what it is. Evolution was not kind to individuals who would retaliate against their genetic offspring. It just wasn't kind to those types of people. So what we end up with is people that love their kids. And that's who we are. That is for the natural selection for forgiveness at work. Okay. In the case of friendships and in the case of relationship partners, there's a little bit more of a you got to make a couple more steps in logic, but to get these cooperative relationships to happen without genetic overlap, you have to have that ability to take a blow on the chin, or else, as I was just describing, I inadvertently harm you, then you harm me back, and then we're not friends anymore. We're not able to help each other with our goals in the future, right? So, but it's because I can detect, or you can detect, that our relationship might have value that you hold back.
So why should we forgive the Germans and Japanese after World War II?
Well, you have to think very, very carefully about the future, right? And that, I mean, I think that is one of the great geniuses of the last century, is that happened in a way that was different from the disaster of how World War I was handled, right? I mean, if you think about the difference, it's pretty staggering, you know. So the end of World War I, what do we do with Germany? They're humiliated. They're made to pay reparations that are really over and above what they're able to with their economy at that point. They aren't able to restart their economy. They are, it's punishment, 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 without sort of enough foresight to see that what we would really like from them is goodwill in the future. That's where you'd like to be. But instead what we get is humiliation, nationalism, World War II. And that even has, there's even the fascinating story about how that same cycle led up to World War I itself, you know. So World War II was done differently, I think. I'm open to being corrected by anyone who knows this history better than I do. But there was, it seems to me, a long-term view that we need to endow these relationships with value, these relationships among nations.
So any relationship that has value, there is kind of an incentive to forgive.
That's right.
Okay.
You can put that value in, right? And that's what I think is really exciting. You can turn enemies into friends if you can make those relationships have value to the actors. You know, we often think, and this was certainly how I thought about things before I wrote Beyond Revenge, we forgive and we'll care about each other again, you know? But if you can figure out ways to care prior to the forgiveness, then you can make forgiveness happen, right? If you have an economic stake in your enemies doing well, right, that can be a motivation to want to forgive, to get past grievances. I mean, I don't think there's anything better for forgiveness in the world than the prospect of making money. I mean, I've really, this is one of the conclusions I've come to that we need to embrace, you know, is that when people stand to make money from each other's welfare, they will put old grievances aside.
China.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, right.
Yeah, I mean, who's bitter at the Chinese anymore, you know? You know, I mean, it just, once we line up these incentives so that I have a stake in you doing well, we don't need to get together and have a group hug. I don't want to harm you because it harms me, right? Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to quote one of my favorite writers, Robert Wright, who said, "It's not in my interest to blow up the people who build my minivan." You know?